I'm Linda Pellerin, the Executive Director of the Shepherd Center of Charlotte. We're a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to helping seniors stay in their home environment for as long as possible. Welcome to Solutions for Seniors. This evening, our guest is Jonathan Frank with the law offices of Jonathan Frank, and he's here to talk about some issues. Well, there's a lot of issues that deal with seniors and the law, and we're going to talk about the most common ones. And let's start out with, let's talk about the baby boomers. Now, I know, I think the last time I checked, they were saying that like in the next 10 to 15 years, 78 million people, baby boomers, will be aging into retirement. And baby boomers, I'm a baby boomer, so I can say this. Baby boomers are a little bit different than the seniors that we're used to, the seniors that grew up during the Depression and everything. I know, and I say this from my own experience and the friends I have and everything, that the baby boomers I know, our parents tended to spoil us a little bit. They wanted us to have what they didn't have because they grew up during the Depression. And so we're used to certain things. And we're used to indulging ourselves and everything. And some of the smart ones of us put some money aside for our retirement, because the one thing we did learn from our parents was that you know, Social Security and all of that stuff might not be there for us, because I know my own parents, who are 86, bought into the whole FDR thing about, don't worry, you know, when you become a senior, you're going to be fine because the government's going to take care of you. And baby boomers, most of the baby boomers anyway, kind of know that's not going to happen. You know, some of us might be okay, but you know, others won't be. Like the ones that were born in, say, 64 may have a problem with Social Security and maybe Medicare and everything.
Very true.
So, so let's talk about this. What kind of plans should baby boomers be thinking about so that their financial security is going to be okay when they actually retire?
Okay. Well, if you're talking about financial requirements, if you will, they should plan way before that they get into their 60s. Of course, that's not always possible. As you said, my parents also spoiled me growing up, so they didn't really save enough. But they should consider what's going to happen to them. We are all living so much longer than we ever anticipated. So yes, Social Security will be there, but to what extent, no one really knows. And again, with prior planning, one of the issues they need to consider is long-term care, whether they look at purchasing a long-term care policy or whether they talk to the kids and let them know that in 15 years they're going to have to take over paying the bills, the food, the medical, etc. It just really depends on each situation, but they need to address it before something happens.
Okay, and I know wills are important in any kind of legal plan, and I know we always had a will. We started out really early, you know, and but you know, some people don't, and even people who do have wills, and I've talked to some of the seniors that are associated with the Shepherd Center, and they'll say, you know, I probably need to update that, because they maybe made the will when they were in their 30s or 40s, and now they're in their 80s, and you know, maybe their beneficiaries have changed, you know, maybe their spouse is no longer alive, and they're like, yeah, you know, I maybe need to, you know, look at that. All right, let's just say for the people who have wills, how often should they update them?
Well, I would say on the average, unless they have other issues, that they should have someone look them over with them every 3 to 5 years. If you look back in your own life 5 years ago, things have changed, I would think, and that obviously will continue. Now, some major events occurs, they win the lottery, one of the members of the husband and wife gets sick, those are issues that they need to deal with if they occur.
Okay, and now what about people who don't have a will?
Okay. People who don't have a will, the law calls that intestate, meaning passing away without a will. The problem there is that whatever state you reside in, that state will write your will. I can safely say, because I'm licensed in a couple other states, that North Carolina is one of the most peculiar. For example, if there's a surviving spouse and there's no will, everything will go to that spouse. If there's a spouse and the decedent has parents, one or both are alive, then the spouse gets 50% and the parents get the other 50%. And it gets stranger yet. If there's a surviving spouse and one child, the spouse gets the first $30,000 of personal property, and then everything else is split 50-50 regardless of the age of the child. Now, if there's 2 or more children, again, the spouse will get the first $30,000 and 1/3 of the rest of the property, and then the other 2/3 is shared amongst the other children.
Wow. Now, I had heard somewhere that if you die without a will, that the state takes half of the estate. That's wrong in North Carolina.
That's wrong. Again, the state, if they can find any kind of a relative or relatives, then those people will receive your assets. It's only after doing due diligence and searching, perhaps even hiring a firm to find people, then the state of North Carolina will take the assets.
Okay, okay. So it is very important then to have a will.
Correct.
Especially in this state.
Yes, and most other states are somewhat similar, but again, it's typically not the scenario you would have thought you wanted, and that's why it's so important.
And now let's talk a little bit about, because as you were saying, many seniors are living longer.
Correct.
And which means that many of them are in sometimes institutions, they're in assisted living, they're in nursing homes, they're in the hospital, toward end of life and all of that. And can you tell me the difference between power of attorney and medical power of attorney? I mean, or is there a difference?
There's definitely a difference. A financial or durable, durable power of attorney is where you, first of all, you name people that you trust. That's a key word there, trust, that will help you should you not be able to help yourself. So you name 1 or more people to help you with your personal and financial affairs. So that's a financial power of attorney. A healthcare power, you name agents, healthcare agents, to help you make medical decisions. And having been doing this type of law over 30 years, I can safely say that the people that could manage your money can't make a medical decision, at least not in a timely manner. So it's a difficult decision on both fronts, because you may not have anyone close to you except family, but is that a good decision? It's really difficult to say until you really look to their past and see how well they've done themselves with their own finances. And on the healthcare side, we tell people to talk with the family members that they name or friends to make sure that they could make a timely decision. For the most part, the document comes into play when there's emergencies, and the doctor might come out of the emergency room and say, okay, we've got 2 or 3 hours to operate, what would you like to do? If that person's just going to freeze and can't make a decision, that's not the person you want to name to help you make healthcare decisions.
Yeah, for instance, I know my parents have named my brother for most of their stuff, because he's close by. My parents live in Vermont, and he's close by. He lives in Vermont also, but he may not be the best one. I'm more educated than he is. I know more about senior issues and things like that, but he's the oldest, and that's how they base their decision. He's the oldest, and he and I have had conversations about this, and he's like, I really don't want to do this. And I'm like, well, sorry, you're on the documentation. Now, if you have a medical power of attorney,
correct.
Where do you keep that? I mean, let's say you have a medical power of attorney and you end up going to the hospital for an emergency and maybe you're unconscious or something. How does the medical staff know that you have that?
Correct. That's an excellent question. First, we tell people that if they have any of the healthcare documents, including the healthcare power of attorney, to keep them at home in a safe place. The last place to put them is in a lockbox at a bank, because the bank will always be closed when you need them. The second possibility is some doctors' offices will ask you for copies. Again, that's a personal decision whether you really want to share them or not. I know that by federal law, when you go into a hospital, they have to ask you if you have a living will or a healthcare power or what's called a HIPAA release. And then if you say yes, they say we would really like copies. My concern is now it's going to be put on your medical records, and if you change your mind and do a new one, how do you get the old one off? So my suggestion to most of our clients is just to hold on to it. Perhaps let one of the children have a copy if need be, but let the agents know where in your home you keep it. So if something happens, you are unconscious, they don't have to go looking for it.
Now, a very wise gentleman once told me to keep all my really pertinent documents in the freezer, because they said sooner or later, it's like, all right, so if I live alone and I pass away, sooner or later somebody's got to go in and clean out the freezer. So sooner or later they're going to find the documents. I mean, would that be? I mean, of course, you have to make sure that they're, that they're packaged to the point where they're not going to, get freezer burn or something. But
well, the reason I'm chuckling is that suggestion comes from AARP.
Oh, does it?
It does. I have a copy of the article. It's probably 10 to 15 years old. The problem is that people actually do that, believe it or not, and then when they bring them in for review, unfortunately they have a mildew odor, and it's sometimes almost overwhelming. I don't know if they got wet or if they just weren't packed in plastic well enough. But well, let me back up. The reason that they say that is your refrigerator or freezer are insulated. So if you happen to have that fire, it's rare that your refrigerator or freezer are going to melt or catch fire or whatever. But I prefer people not do that. I think I'm allergic to mildew, but it's not a bad alternative.
Well, and as I said, my folks live in Vermont, and they've had a lot of flooding, in the past couple months, and I mean, in my mind, all of a sudden now I'm seeing a freezer or a refrigerator floating down a river or something. So that wouldn't do very well for anybody if all your papers were in there, would it?
No, it wouldn't.
So, well, that's interesting. Let's see. Okay, if you have a will, does your estate have to go through probate?
Well, that's a pretty tricky question. The will itself has to go to probate, but it depends on how your assets are owned when you pass away. So, for example, property passes really three basic ways: by contract, by statute, and by will or trust. So by contract is where you have assets that have named beneficiaries, such as life insurance, annuities, IRAs. I'm sure there's some other accounts I can't think of right now, but those will pass outside of probate, outside of the will, to the named beneficiaries. By statute, if the property is owned by two or more parties and the title reads Linda and Jonathan as joint tenants with rights of survivorship, that will also pass outside the will to the surviving joint tenant. So some people have wonderful wills, and then we find out that husband and wife have 99% of their assets in joint tenancy. So at the first death, nothing will pass under the will, but by statute, the will has to go to the courthouse, whether anything passes or not.
What's the time frame on that? I mean, typically, once the will goes to the courthouse. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, how long does the family have to wait until things can get settled?
Okay. Well, every state is different. So North Carolina is one of the most progressive ones. In other words, once the will is filed and the executor decides to act, again, you can't force them to. They sign some documents appointing them as the executor. their job and responsibility is then to go hunting for the assets, again, that would pass under the will. At the same time that the executor is appointed, one of his duties or her duties is to publish for claims. The claims period in North Carolina is 90 days. Back in Illinois, it was 6 months. I know some states go as long as a year. So until the claims period is over, there's nothing one can do until wait till that time expires. And at that point, again after 90 days, the executor will then see if anyone has filed claims against the estate, go down to the courthouse and look in the file. Or sometimes they are sent to the attorney, and the attorney will gather them together, if you will. And depending on what the claims are, see that they are paid. Now, just because someone files a claim doesn't mean it's legitimate, so we sometimes have to look behind and see where it comes from. Unfortunately, in these economic times, there are people that will prey on the survivors in an estate, so we have to make sure. But once the claims period is over, and assuming the estate is under, right now the magic number is under $5 million, you can then make distribution. So we tell people about 4 to 5 months the estate can be open and closed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I know some seniors, well actually not even seniors, there's a lot of people out there that are going online and doing their will online. Is that a good thing?
99% of the time, no. And I'm not picking on these people that do that, because it's certainly most of the time better than nothing. One of the most popular sites is LegalZoom. They are now being sued in California, and there's a class action suit. The problem is that no one's situation is simple. We get calls all the time, I just want to do a simple will. And then we find out, well, let's see, one of the kids is a spendthrift, one unfortunately has an alcohol problem, one married badly, and those are not simple things that can be dealt with. It gets a little bit more technical. So I kind of shudder when I see those wills. They just don't go far enough. They because it's online, you're not talking to a human being, and that they're not asking the right questions so that you could do a good job.
So even though they only cost like what, $30 or whatever to do them online, I don't even, I think I went to the site one time just to kind of see about it. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't think it would be the best thing, you know. And we already had a will anyway, but
good for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say about $79 is what I've heard. I don't know if that's correct or not.
Yeah, but that's not a good thing. Well, all right then. If it's not a good thing to do your will online, what about your medical power of attorney? And I mean, can you, if LegalZoom is there, they must have all of these documents online. And you know, is that a good thing? I mean, how hard is it to pick up the phone and call an attorney?
Not that difficult.
Yeah.
But I also should mention, and for the attorneys out there, I'm sorry, but you should know that hospice makes available the new advanced directive, the living will, and the new healthcare power of attorney free.
Okay.
Also, some hospitals, not all, will actually, if you go to the public relations department, they will also give you those documents.
Okay,
but not a will.
Right. Okay.
But again, and that I think is a great public service. They're not that difficult to do from our end, but again, whoever's giving them the forms can't usually answer questions that may arise. The new documents, the new format is a little bit difficult to understand, and that's really not what you're going to get from hospice or the hospital.
Okay. Okay, you hear all the time where a will is contested.
Well, hopefully not all the time.
Well, I mean, every once in a while you'll hear, okay,
yes.
Well, you know, that, and it could be like on a national thing. It's always like usually somebody famous or whatever, and the will is contested. And because always, you know, usually somebody obscure shows up and says, oh, well, you know, I'm the long lost, you know, great-grandson or whatever. And, you know, are there things that you can put in a will to make them so that they can't be contested? I mean, you know, are there fail safes?
Well, again, it depends, but
Of course, on the family and whatever, but.
true. Well, let me back up. First of all, in North Carolina, it's called a caveat proceeding. And what's amazing is that whether it's a family member or an interested party, they have up to 3 years after the will is probated to file a will contest. So I found that surprising. I mean, that's an awful long time. You can put in a non-contestability clause in a will that says basically if you or your sibling or whatever contest it, you'll get nothing. However, in North Carolina, if you can prove that the person who did the will was under duress, did not know or understand what they were signing, they were pushed into it, one of the kids took them to an attorney who, for whatever reason, did a will, and they said, "Dad, please sign this." So if they can prove that there was undue persuasion, yes, then that clause will not work.
Is there any, what would you recommend for seniors? You know, what advice, you've been doing this for 30 some odd years or whatever, what advice do you have for seniors in the community in general so that, you know, their papers are in order?
Well, first they should see if they can find them. You'd be surprised how many people say, "I've been looking through the house for the last week so I could bring them to you, and I can't locate them." So first, keep in mind that they need to keep them in a safe place, but they should be reviewed. Sometimes it's not the children that they need to watch out for. Sometimes it's the in-laws. But the documents you need basically are a will or a trust. You need the 3 healthcare documents. Healthcare power of attorney we've talked about, advance directive, which is the new living will, and a HIPAA release, which allows the hospital, the doctors, to talk to your healthcare agents. And lastly is the financial power of attorney. Once again, being careful, giving it some good thought as to who they should name in all these documents, not just name the oldest because they may not want to do it, maybe they're too far away. There's always extenuating circumstances that we help people through and talk through it and see who might be the best. It might be a cousin or someone rather than the children. You just never know.
In your experience, how many people, when they draw up a will, actually set aside money for nonprofits? I'm asking this, you know, for my own benefit. You know, we talk to, you know, we send out information frequently about, you know, leaving a bequest, you know, to a nonprofit, preferably my nonprofit, but to any nonprofit. And I mean, is this something that people typically do, or do they just pretty much concentrate on family?
Well, as always, it depends, but we try and talk about that to see if there's some charity that has helped out someone in the family, their church, whatever. It's just doesn't seem to be a large item on their minds lately. I would say in the last 3 years, with the way the economy is, it's not really in the forefront. But an interesting comment that I'd like to make that I've seen is it doesn't matter whether they're worth $50,000 or $5 million. It's just, I think, a matter of upbringing, perhaps, or again having actually received some benefit from a charity that brings it to mind.
Interesting, interesting. Any final thoughts as we wrap up the show today?
Well, first, I greatly appreciate your time and letting me be here. I would say that I would love to see the 70% of people who don't have wills see someone. It doesn't have to be us, but there's a number of good attorneys out there besides ourselves. But rather than being an afterthought, I'd like to see more people do it as a conscious thought.
And to do it early and not wait until you're becoming, you know, all of a sudden you find out that maybe you have cancer or heart disease or something, and you go, oh, you know, maybe I better put a will together. And for heaven's sake, please don't go to the internet, right?
Please. That's correct.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, for coming out and talking with us today. You know, it's always good to you know, I talk to a lot of seniors. You know, they come in as volunteers, and I meet them out in the community and everything. And you know, it just surprises me. You know, some of them are very savvy, take care of all their own finances and everything, and are really on top of everything, and yet, others aren't, and they're like, well, I don't have anything. I don't have anybody to give my money to go to, so I don't even have a will. And I just look at them and I'm like, I just find that just amazing. And that's usually when I say, well, give it to me.
Well,
give it
to
to the
you,
Shepherd Center.
Precisely. There's nothing wrong with that.
Give it to donate it somewhere or something like that. Don't just, don't just die without anything, going anywhere. So even if it's just, a couple $100, that could be something that could help out a nonprofit or something.
Absolutely. Excuse me for interrupting, but keep in mind the intestate laws I talked about. Once again, if they won't do it, the state of North Carolina is going to do it for them, and I'm sure it's not what they wanted to have happen.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. I want to remind everybody that the Shepherd Center now has a scholarship program. So if you would like to be involved in our Adventures in Learning program or our computer program, you can do so, and you feel like you can't afford it, you can call our office and fill out a very small application, and possibly you can have a scholarship and get to go to these programs for free. Our newsletter will be coming out first part of December, and we'll have all the programs for January, February, and March. And don't forget, our Adventures in Learning program will begin on January 23rd. So that's the beginning of our new year. And we're going to have a lot of really great classes and general sessions. And our computer program, which is held at Southminster Retirement Community, will also be, it's ongoing. We have Introduction to Computers for all of you seniors that are going, what is a computer? And we also have short classes and everything for that. And again, you can get a scholarship for that. So, and don't forget our Seniors Health Insurance Information Program. Medicare counseling is ongoing right now. So thank you all very much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next year, or actually next month. And so thank you, and I'll see you in December.